Don't count out the Ducks just yet with Dakorien Moore. Big update there. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Lots to get to on today's show. We'll talk Dan Lanning, we'll talk men's basketball hype, and a lot more coming up today. But Dakorien Moore is the number one, at least most recognized name for Oregon on the recruiting trail right now. 5-star wide receiver in the class of 2025. Number one at his position with good reason. He decommitted from LSU, and Oregon fans collectively, I think we've had our tinfoil hats on with regards to Dakorien Moore because, if he just decommits from LSU, Oregon's still recruiting him. And, of course, Rashad Sample's father is his head coach at Duncanville High School over in Texas. Well, the big news on that front in particular is that Oregon has got an official visit locked in, and that is massive because when Moore first decommitted from LSU, he tweeted out, "My recruitment is not open." Well, that's probably just to ward off the schools that would reach out to him and say, "Hey, maybe, are you interested?" Like that's an attempt to keep his phone as quiet as possible, and I can respect that. The schools that had already been recruiting him, though, are very much in the mix. And once he decommitted from LSU, the expectation, if you looked online, was, well, he's a lock to Texas. He's going to Texas. He's absolutely, positively going to go to Texas. He very well could go to Texas. They're in the mix. And anytime a kid decommits from a major school or is a big-time recruit, and he was going outside the state, you, of course, look to the premier programs in the state. I mean, think about this in the context of the state of Oregon. If you had a kid, like go back to Thomas Tyner, for instance, if he had been committed to Michigan and then decommitted, what's the first thing Oregon fans would be in the comments section talking about or chatting about on Twitter or shooting me messages? It would be, hey, we're going to get Thomas Tyner because, in-state kid. That's where Texas is at right now. So maybe they do have a leg up. But Oregon being able to get an official visit here on the books, that's huge. Now, he was going to visit this weekend, and then he did not visit this past weekend. He backed out of that, but the fact that he still put Oregon on the list, very, very good sign. So, Oregon's getting an official visit from him on June 21st. He has two others scheduled. Ohio State on May 31st, Texas on June 14th. That puts Oregon last. You'd always rather be first or last in the visit department. Now, this is not an exclusive list. I think he could try and keep this narrow. A lot of schools are going to reach out to him because he's just a really, really talented guy. But this is really the biggest name that Oregon is going after in the class of 2025 amidst several big names that they had on campus over the weekend. But I think this is great news for those who, get super into these recruitments like I do and care about these recruitments like I do because we understand how important they are. Dakorien Moore setting an official visit for Oregon, it being the last of the bunch. We'll see when he commits. We'll see when he ends up signing. I would think, if his recruitment is this discussed, is this talked about, I would think he's someone that is going to sign in the early window in December, but there's a ways to go. Texas, probably the favorite, but are they the only school in the mix? Is it a lock? No. And I think this was great news because it felt like right after he decommitted from LSU that, oh no, he's just going to go to Texas. He's just going to go to Texas. No one else is even going to get a chance. Nope, that's clearly not the case. So really, really positive update there for the Ducks. Speaking of positive updates on the recruiting front, this past weekend, by all reports, was a smashing success. And Oregon had a big recruiting weekend. So list of names that were theirs is from Ducks Wire over at USA Today. My guy, Zach Neal, who's been on the show before. Awesome dude, does a great job covering and writing about the Ducks. Michael Terry III, who's the number one athlete in the class, he was there. Justin Hill, 4-star defensive lineman. Trajan Odom, 4-star, I believe, defensive lineman. Interesting note, Douglas Utu, a name, Utu, it's U-T-U. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. 4-star offensive lineman from Bishop Gorman High School, which is probably the best one, along with maybe Liberty High School down in the Las Vegas area, which puts out some pretty good recruits. There were also, recruiting's crazy, a couple of 2026 recruits, a running back and a defensive lineman. We need not dive into them there. One of them was not Jakeem Stewart, but another highly rated guy. But Douglas Utu was in the mix, and I want to highlight him for a moment, number one, because I haven't talked about him before here on the show, but number two, because I think offensive line is a position that Oregon has to be able to go out and recruit in the class of 2025, because the depth of that position is going to thin considerably after this year. And I think that's also part of the reason you see Oregon going after Dakorien Moore. The fundamental reason you go after that guy is he's number one in his position. If you have a chance, it doesn't matter who else is committed, who you've got. If you can get the top guy at his position in a high school class, you go and get him. But Oregon after this year is going to lose at least 3, maybe 4 receivers. We'll see what Gary Bryant Jr. ends up doing. He could actually come back for another season of college football because his first year was COVID, and then he redshirted at USC before transferring to Oregon. So maybe he ends up returning for a third season with the Ducks. But offensive line, with the decommitment a couple weeks ago of Sandman Thompson out of Florida, that's a position that doesn't have anybody in the class of 2025 yet, and I think those efforts are going to pick up. So when I was scrolling through and looking around at who was on campus and how the weekend went, and all the reports were that things went really well. Michael Terry III had great things to say about Oregon and the offense and everything like that. When I saw Douglas Utu's name, I kind of had my eyes pop up and like, oh, hey, we're making moves along the offensive line, which I fully expect to happen. Another couple names to know, Achilles Smith Jr., class of 2025 quarterback recruit. He was on campus, and you love seeing that little inter-class recruiting. That's something that happens all the time in recruiting circles, and quarterbacks especially can be a linchpin position or recruit to say, hey guys, let's go here, let's build something together, let's make it a movement or whatnot. But love seeing him out there recruiting other guys like Jonah Williams, for instance. DJ Pickett was on campus as well. Those are both 5-star defensive backs, but Jonah Williams is an uphill battle. And there was a picture, I think, going around with Achilles Smith and Jonah Williams. So I think that's maybe not as notable as we would like it to be, but notable enough to bring up here on the show. And I have not heard anything, speaking of Achilles Smith Jr., to indicate that he's wavering off his Oregon commitment at all. And I know that that's someone who a lot of Oregon fans, especially maybe the older fans, would be really, really excited to see, understandably so. Talented recruit, but the prospect of Achilles Smith's kid playing quarterback for the Ducks, that would just hit all the right feels for some Oregon fans out there. So really, really good recruiting update from over the weekend. More thoughts coming on the class of 2025 and Dan Lanning and the way that he has recruited for the program. And I have more thoughts on LinkedIn Jobs, obviously, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality candidates that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free, which is a good price. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites, so if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn, which is why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, so let's talk Dan Lanning and hop into the mailbag, which is always open. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks, DMs and mentions wide open. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. This question came in from Regan. Hey Spencer, great episode. Question for the mailbag. What do you think we expected from Dan Lanning when he was hired, and what has he especially delivered on 3 years in? I did not see his crazy recruiting ability coming at all. Well, I didn't necessarily think he'd be at this level, but when you hire somebody from Georgia out of the SEC, you certainly expect to be able to have ties to schools and just kind of that region down in that part of the country. And I think that where Lanning has really excelled is putting together a staff that knows how to recruit anywhere and everywhere. And Brian Smith has talked about this several times on the show about the importance of out-of-state recruiting, since the state of Oregon only gives you maybe 4 or 5 blue chip recruits per year. There are some good players, to be sure. Oregon's got several in this class, and I'm sure we'll have several in the next class. But that number is going to be under 5 every single year. But Oregon's ability to go into Texas and Florida and California and go to Maryland or go to DC or go to Michigan, right? And get, a guy like Dante Moore initially when he was committing out of high school. Like all of that, I think, is a testament to the work that Lanning puts in on the recruiting trail. And look, when he got hired, I certainly expected that he was going to recruit well. Like Oregon at some level recruits itself, but how high it goes, that's up to the coach. And the reason I think Lanning has passed my expectations on the recruiting trail is he just pulled in the highest ranked class in the history of Oregon football, and he hasn't even won a conference championship yet. And I'll get to the results on the field in just a sec to kind of look at the other half of this question, whether you implied that I should be looking at that or not. But I think the recruiting ability has been excellent, really from the jump. I started hosting this show right around the time that he got hired, which, I wish I'd been there just a couple months earlier, but no, it's okay. It was a fun time. And so Lanning got hired, and the initial impressions were really good because you had players go in the transfer portal, and then Lanning convinced them to stay. And that was like, hey, these guys like whatever he is selling. And then the 2022 recruiting class was salvaged into a top 20 class because they landed Josh Connerly and a couple other players, but Connerly most notably, and you're going, well, hey, that was way better than expected because you had a mass exodus, of course. Some went with Cristobal, some decommitted. Guys like Kelvin Banks, for instance, went to Texas, and he's having a great career over there with the Longhorns and whatnot. That was kind of a moment where I felt, okay, I think we got something here. I think this guy knows how to recruit a little bit, and you'd think he would, coming from the SEC. But then the 2023 class came, and you went, oh, okay, that was really good. Top 10 high school class, top 10 portal class, that's outstanding. And he's just upped it another notch with the best recruiting class in program history and the number 2 portal class in the country. There are a lot of heavy hitters to go up against in the transfer portal. And for Lanning going into his 3rd year to recruit at that level, that passes my expectations. Now, I expected to be in the top 10, 15 range. Did not think by year 3 he'd be pulling top 5 high school and portal classes. That is beyond what I expected and should make Oregon fans feel really, really good about what he can do in the future and how sustainable this is. This is still relatively early in his tenure and in his experience as a head coach. And that's the other side that I've been really impressed with, his ability to put together a staff. Sometimes guys get hired to be a head coach or they become a head coach for the first time, and you learn pretty quickly, he might not be a head coach. He might just be a coordinator or a really good number 2, or doesn't have the ceiling that we're looking for at the head coaching position. There are guys like that in the NFL. There are guys like that in college. But Lanning's ability to have major coaches, like offensive coordinator, one offensive coordinator leave, and then make another great hire. And his offensive line coach, and he makes a great hire. And the running backs coach leave, and he makes a really good hire. That's what I've been really impressed with, and why I think the recruiting success has been so good. Like the head coach matters in recruiting, obviously. Obviously, that is true. He has to be able to put together a great staff. And Lanning's ability to just continually make really good hires. And I think we're going to look back one day and realize how crazy it was that Chris Hampton was a co-defensive coordinator. I think after this season, he probably gets picked up as a DC somewhere full-time at a Power 4 school, and he goes out there and kills it. And, Rashad Samples is somebody who Kenny Dillingham said could already maybe be running a college program somewhere, maybe not at the Power 4 level, but like at the G5 level. And if that guy becomes a head coach one day, it could be one of those staffs that you look back and won't be on the same level, of course, but it'll give off the same vibe as these Saban staffs. You look back and you go, wow, Kirby Smart was on the same staff as Mario Cristobal and Dan Lanning and Lane Kiffin, and they're just head coaches all over the place. So I think that's been really, really good. As for the results on the field, I think he's been about what I expected. Like, Oregon has been a place where every single coach since Rich Brooks has had a winning record at Oregon. So, yeah, I expect you to win. Oregon fans should expect any head coach that comes through to win. That is the standard. I think he hit the ground running after the Georgia game, which was, of course, a nightmare, but an awful way to begin your head coaching career. I think the on-field results have so far been good. I think the recruiting and talent acquisition with the portal has been better than the on-field results in terms of how Lanning's performed relative to my expectations. But last year was a huge year for me in terms of having confidence in Lanning, because I'll be honest, and I said this at the time, after Lanning's first year, I was a little disappointed in the defense. Or not a little, sorry. I was rather disappointed in the defense. I thought that a guy who was the DC for the national champions, who had that caliber of defense, would be able to come in and make a unit that had struggled better, and they weren't. They just were not very good. They were allowing 27 points a game in 2022. That's not good. And I thought that jump would be more substantial. I thought it would be more like what we saw last year, but that's where the talent acquisition, of course, comes into play. So, they went down about 10 points per game allowed, and I think they can be even lower than that this year with the way they brought in talent, retain guys from going to the NFL like Jeff Bossa and Jordan Birch, and the way that they've got staff continuity with Tosh Lupoy and Chris Hampton and Lanning, of course. Like, those were your top 3 defensive coaches last year. Those are your top 3 defensive coaches this year. I think all that has been really good. So I'd say A+ for talent acquisition, on-field results. I'd give him a solid B. You've put together back-to-back 10-win seasons, but there were some lapses. There have been some growing pains, and that happens. That happens as a head coach. We saw that in his first year, and then last year, just couldn't get through a great head coach. But, he's also 2-0 against Kyle Whittingham, and that's not a small thing to be able to say. There are not a lot of coaches early in their tenures as head coaches, even at great places to coach like Oregon, that can say they went 2-0 against Kyle Whittingham. It's a tough thing to do, especially in the last few years. So I think that's where he can still improve the most, and why the talent acquisition should excite Oregon fans. You're like, haven't even won a conference title, like winning games, playing at a high level, competing to play at a national championship or playoff caliber, level of football year in, year out. That's the expectation. But they haven't actually achieved those things yet. Once you do that, it can only go up. So, good question. Love it. Always keep the mailbag questions coming. Got more to get to. Is this the best men's basketball team since the Final Four run? I'll answer that question coming up next. First, I'll talk about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So if you pick the Timberwolves to go into Denver and beat the Nuggets, which I got to say, I was really happy to see, that would have hit. If you pick the Pacers to go to Madison Square Garden and beat the Knicks, That would have hit. And you could have turned $5 and $150 in bonus bets to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Oregon's win total, 10.5. That's a pretty big win total. Tied for the highest win total of any team in the country. If you think Oregon's going 12-0, you can go put your money where your mouth is over with our friends at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. All right, let's keep the good times rolling. This question came in from Dylan. Question answered here or on the pod. On the pod it be. What would be your starting 5 basketball team since Final Four team? I got mine second. Okay, I'll come back to that in a sec. Is it a darn near lock that if Dante comes back, it will be the best year in Oregon sports history? Oregon football to the Natty, basketball to the Final Four, and baseball to Omaha. Baseball youth is crazy this year, and football and basketball return everyone. So my hopes for football are very high. If Dante comes back, this is not an exaggeration, my hopes for basketball will be even higher. Full stop. I think that if N'Faly Dante comes back, Oregon's chances of winning a national championship will be greater in men's basketball than in football. They will be realistic, possible, and attainable in both. But if Dante is the starting center, you can hear how giddy I get in my voice just thinking about that. If Dante is the starting center and Biddle is the backup, and you have Brandon Angel, TJ Bamba, Jackson Shellstad, Bam Tracy, Mookie Cook, Raheem Moss, like that's such a squad. Such a squad. I think what you were trying to say, Dylan, in the first part of your question, but had a little typo here, is would this starting 5 be the best since the Final Four? I hope that's what you meant, because that's a question that I want to answer here. I think with or without Dante, you can readily make the case it would be the best starting 5 since the Final Four team, which was Peyton Pritchard, Dylan Ennis, Tyler Dorsey, Dylan Brooks, and Jordan Bell. And you had Chris Boucher in the mix before he got hurt going into the tournament, and Oregon still went to the Final Four. With that starting 5, like let's say Dante comes back and gets a 6th year, which he should. He absolutely should. Quick note for those that have been following this story of sorts, like there hasn't been a major update recently, but I've been talking about it here on the show. Javon Blackshear is a player over at GCU, a conference that I do play-by-play in the Western Athletic. They're actually going to go to the West Coast Conference, GCU is. But many of you know I'm the play-by-play voice for Southern Utah. GCU's in our league, and Javon Blackshear just got another year of eligibility because of a medical waiver application, which is the same exact thing N'Faly Dante is applying for. Make of that what you will. At the very least, there is some incredibly recent precedent that Dante could get another year. But if you line up this year's 5 with Dante against that Final Four's 5, look, Jordan Bell would have a tough time stopping N'Faly Dante. It would be tough because Bell was a little bit smaller. I just wonder if the wing scoring would be the same. Like freshman Peyton Pritchard, sophomore Jackson Shellstad. By any measure, sophomore Jackson Shellstad is a better player. Then you'd go to the wing. Dylan Ennis and Dylan Brooks and Tyler Dorsey versus TJ Bamba, probably Brandon Angel and KJ Evans. I gotta go with Dorsey, Ennis, and Brooks there. But Bamba, Evans, and Angel, man, that's a pretty darn good squad, especially with TJ Bamba in the mix, transfer from Villanova, formerly at Washington State. The teams that Oregon's had since that Final Four run, like I think they went to the NIT actually the year after, then got back to the tournament a couple times. I think that COVID year team had a really, really nice 5. Especially if Dante had been healthy. That was Chris Duarte, LJ Figueroa, Eugene Omaru, Eugene from Eugene, as Bill Walton would say. That was a good squad. Got to the Sweet 16 and then unfortunately had a bad day against a really good USC team. But I think that you could put up this year's 5 against any 5 that Oregon has had since that Final Four team. And I'm probably taking this year's if Dante's in there. And even if Dante's not in there, I'd still lean towards it. KJ Evans could be poised for a year 2 jump. Same thing with Jackson Shellstad. And I am incredibly high on this Oregon basketball team with TJ Bamba in the mix. Like it's just, oh gosh, they could be so very good. Would it be the best year in Oregon sports history? Look, speaking of baseball, I'll get to them in just a moment. I can't remember the last time I would legitimately feel men's basketball and football were national title contenders. I don't know if I remember feeling that way in the same season. Yeah, it'd probably be the most hype they've had at the same time that I can remember. 2015, well, I mean, the 2015 Oregon team was coming off a national championship run, and then the 2015-16 team for men's basketball went to the Elite Eight. So that'd probably be the last time it was at this sort of level. But speaking of baseball, Oregon baseball is the number 3 seed in the Pac-12 tournament. They're embarking this week on their Pac-12 tournament title defense. Softball, unfortunately, fell in the Norman Regional. Just a brutal draw. Like they lost by a run to Oklahoma, double elimination. They beat Boston. They lost to Oklahoma. They beat Boston again, and then they lost to Oklahoma again. Like it's Oklahoma softball. Like what? Like it's tough. It's tough. But it made me think of a question that was asked recently here on the show about, hey, does football have, a lot of other great effects for other sports teams in the athletic department? Oregon's got a bunch of great teams. Softball is one of them. Softball was in a super regional last year, interregional again this year, battling with Oklahoma, who are probably going to go win the national championship again because, it's Oklahoma. If you know anything about softball, Oklahoma is Alabama, but, more dominant, quite literally. So, but baseball's in a good spot. They would certainly love to have momentum going through the Pac-12 tournament to take home and win the tournament for a second straight year and win the last Pac-12 baseball tournament. I just checked as I was recording the show, a confirmation message from Jared Mack that if Oregon wants to host a regional, they'll have to win the Pac-12 tournament. But if they don't win the Pac-12 tournament, they'll still be into regionals. So postseason baseball there, I've liked the way that they're playing. And I'm ending today's show with this because I said I would check in on it, and indeed I did. And shout out to those of you in the comment section that were brave enough to put your worst football or any Oregon sports take out there. Because this question came in from Cheez-It Munchkins. What is your worst Oregon Ducks take of all time? Mine is, quote, that Mariota kid looks good, but we would be stupid to not go with Bennett. So I said I had a hard time thinking about this, and I asked a friend who's always on top of me for my bad takes, and I had one last year that was pretty awful. It was pretty awful. And that's that Tez Johnson wasn't going to play a big role in the offense. He was Bo's brother. He was very small. He's coming from Troy. Did not expect big things from our guy Tez Johnson, who is now the alpha in the wide receivers room, it appears. He, of course, would go on to set the Oregon single season record in receptions and have a 1,000-yard season, and is returning to contribute to what I think is the best wide receiver room in the Big Ten and among the best in the entire country. So that take was pretty. I thought he'd be a guy you get the ball to every now and then because Bo wants to throw to his brother. Did you guys know they were related? And that just wasn't the case. He definitely wanted to throw him the ball because he's a heck of a football player. So to date that I can remember, that's probably my worst Oregon take so far, at least since I've been hosting this show. Nobody's perfect. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.